For over 300 years, millions of human beings were torn from their homes, chained together, packed into ships, and transported across an ocean to a world they did not know. It was one of the greatest crimes in human history, and its impact is still with us today. This is the story of the Atlantic slave trade, how it began, how it operated, why it became so powerful, and how its effects still shape our world. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Hidden Pages. Before the 1400, when European ships began pushing down the West African coast, Portugal, Spain, later Britain, France, and the Netherlands, all searching for new wealth, new routes, and new empires. At the same time, in the newly conquered Americas, indigenous populations were collapsing, devastated by European diseases and brutal exploitation. Europe's solution to their labor crisis would become one of the darkest chapters in human history. At first, European traders exchanged goods with African kingdoms for gold, ivory, and spices, but soon the demand for labor in the Americas exploded, especially for sugar, tobacco, and cotton plantations. European traders turned to slave networks that already existed within parts of Africa, but they expanded them into a massive industrial system. Fortified trading posts appeared across the West African coast. Places like Elmina Castle, Goree Island, and Ouida, silent witnesses to millions of lost lives. African captives were marched for miles to the coast, kidnapped in raids, or sold by rival kingdoms desperate for European weapons and goods. The human cost was unimaginable. The Atlantic slave trade formed what historians call the triangular trade, a brutal three-part economic machine. Leg 1, Europe to Africa. Ships filled with guns, steel, textiles, and alcohol sailed to the African coast. These goods were exchanged for human beings. Leg 2, Africa to the Americas. This was the infamous Middle Passage, the deadliest ocean crossing in history. Inside the dark holds of slave ships, Africans were chained, starved, beaten, and crushed together in suffocating spaces. Disease spread like wildfire. Some tried to resist. Others chose to jump into the ocean rather than live in bondage. It is estimated that 10 to 15% died before reaching the Americas, their bodies thrown into the sea. Leg 3, the Americas to Europe. In the New World, enslaved people were auctioned like livestock. Their labor produced sugar, cotton, tobacco, coffee, and gold, all shipped back to Europe. The profits were enormous, fueling the rise of global capitalism and the economic development of European empires. Life for enslaved Africans in the Americas was defined by violence. On plantations, they worked from sunrise to sunset, cutting cane, picking cotton, harvesting tobacco. Families were torn apart, children were sold, women faced constant abuse. Men lived under the threat of the whip, the chain, or the execution post, but even in these conditions, enslaved Africans resisted. They preserved their music, their faith, their languages. Drums, chants, stories, and rhythms survived, and became the foundations of blues, jazz, samba, reggae, and gospel. They ran away. They rebelled. They fought. The most powerful rebellion came from the island of Saint-Domingue, today's Haiti, where enslaved Africans rose up, defeated European armies, and created the world's first black republic. Their victory struck fear into every slave-owning empire. By the late 1700s, the world began to change. Enlightenment thinkers spoke of natural rights. Religious movements condemned slavery. Economists argued that slavery was inefficient, and enslaved people themselves fought back every day, refusing to accept their chains. The abolition movement grew stronger. Britain banned the slave trade in 1807. The United States followed in 1808. France abolished slavery in 1848. Brazil, the last major slave nation, ended slavery in 1888. The trade was over, but slavery's shadow would not disappear. The Atlantic slave trade permanently reshaped the world. 1. Demographic transformation. Africa lost tens of millions of people, entire regions depopulated. Meanwhile, the Americas became home to large Afro-descendant populations, creating new cultures, new nations, and new identities. 2. Economic inequality. Europe and North America grew wealthy. Africa became weakened, destabilized, and later colonized. The inequalities created during this era still echo today. 3. The invention of modern racism. To justify slavery, European thinkers created the idea of race as a biological hierarchy. These false ideas became the foundation for segregation, apartheid, colonialism, and modern-day discrimination. 4. Cultural survival. Despite the horrors, African culture survived and transformed the world, shaping music, language, religion, and art across the Americas. The after-effects of the Atlantic slave trade still shape our societies. Racial inequality, economic disparity, political instability, cultural trauma, debates about reparations, movements like Black Lives Matter, identity struggles across the African diaspora. These are not accidental. They are the unfinished chapters of a history that began centuries ago. The Atlantic slave trade was not just a chapter in history, it was a turning point, a force that built nations, shaped economies, and rewrote human society. To understand our world today, its inequalities, its struggles, its cultures, we must understand this past. Not to reopen old wounds, but to ensure they never appear again. History cannot be changed, but by remembering it, we can change the future.